Let me guess how you are building right on Deadlock. You're probably opening some top player builds from the build manager, building left to right, no thought, every single game. And for most games, it'll work. You'll build left to right, you'll carry, win all your matches. But for some games, you'll have all the right items, but you're still getting destroyed. Well, here's the problem. Top players and people that have thousands of hours in this game aren't building the same every single game. They're building for a specific tempo, for a specific lane, for a specific enemy team comp. So when you're using someone's build, you're not copying a build. You're copying a solved answer for a problem that you don't have. In this video, I'm going to teach you how to think about items in Deadlock. I'm not going to teach you what to buy. I'm going to teach you why to buy. And with this, hopefully through time, you will learn to build without even looking at a build in Deadlock. Before we talk about anything too crazy, I gotta cover some ground. So let's start by talking about the first and most important thing you need to know about builds, prerequisite information, investment spikes. Essentially, how this works is all items in Deadlock are either weapon items, vitality items, or spirit items. And through those items, there's this thing called investments, which you can see here. When you have 800 souls invested into your weapon, you get 7% weapon damage as a natural buff to your character. Same thing goes for health, 75 flat health, and spirit, 7. And this obviously scales with more and more money that you invest. The more money you invest in the weapon, the more weapon damage you get, all the way up to 135%. As you're looking at the investments here, you might notice at 4,800 souls, there's this like weird star and it's like highlighted for each of the investments. And what this is essentially when Valve released this investment system, this never existed. All investments were, scaling at different rates. Some investments you gained more from at specific tiers, whatever. But Valve decided that universally, when you have 4,800 souls invested into a tier, you get the most gain or jump from any of the other tiers. So if you see here, from 22,000 souls about to 28,000 souls, you're only getting about a 20% jump, right? But from 3.2 to 4.8, you're getting a 29% jump. So if we're looking for like efficiency, like what is the most efficient money to have invested into any investment, it is 4,800 souls. When we get more and more into investments and builds in Deadlock, you'll see that a lot of players will try to build in accordance with these investment spikes. They'll build 4.8 thousand souls or 4.8k souls to their weapon, 4.8k souls to hit their health, 4.8k souls to get their spirit. But as we'll discuss further in this video, this is sometimes a flaw in builds. Sometimes getting too tunnel visioned on these investment spikes hurts more than it does good. My final prologue before we get into some real advice for building in Deadlock and the specifics of how I think are these 3 rules in Deadlock that I personally follow myself. Now, I don't care what any streamer has to say about, oh, just build left to right, you'll be okay. I don't care about that. These, in my opinion, are necessary to become a fundamentally strong Deadlock player. If you're not doing these things, you will never, in my opinion, become a great Deadlock player. My first rule, always try to understand. And keyword, try to. You don't have to understand, but try to understand why you're purchasing an item. If you're following a build left to right, which is fine if you're starting off, right? And you see here, okay, these 4 items, why am I building these items on this character? Just try to understand it. You will not have the correct idea starting off, but through time, this critical thinking skill of just trying to understand why you're building these items will help you so much in the long run of Deadlock. My next rule in Deadlock is always consider other options in builds. As long as you're thinking of other options, that will do you wonders in the long run of playing Deadlock. The reason for that is I can give you a perfect example right now. A lot of people in Deadlock right now are mindlessly buying metal skin. And sure, the item is very strong. It is correct to build in a lot of situations. But the issue is a lot of players are building curse, which completely removes metal skin if you have it active. So a line of thinking that we could create is potentially maybe there'll be a meta in the future where it is more optimal to build bullet resilience, the 3k bullet resist item, over metal skin because of the amount of curses. And this might not even be a meta thing. It might just be a game dependent thing. If the enemy team has 4 or 5 curses, you're never going to be able to use metal skin without it getting removed. So right there is an example in the current time, the timeline in the present that I'm existing in, where this line of thinking, even at the highest level, which is what I play at, can just do wonders for you. And if you build up this habit and are not scared to do this, it will just do wonders for you in the future. And my last rule that kind of summarizes the first two rules is to never buy an item without thought. So what I mean by thought is I'm not expecting you to sit at the secret shop or your shop and ponder for a minute in the game, be like, what is the most optimal buy here? I'm not asking that. If the thought is a second, thought is 10 seconds, the thought is 5 seconds, 2 seconds, half a second, it doesn't matter. As long as you are thinking actively, like how you try to understand what you're buying and considering other options, that skill, I'm just telling you, will be very, very, very valuable. You guys wouldn't believe how many people I coach that have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours in the game, and because they don't think about builds critically and imaginative, and they just fall off the right, how many problems they have and how much that limits their growth. So we're going to split this up into two sections. We're going to do an early game itemization section, and we're going to do a mid game itemization section. And obviously first, we're going to start with the early game itemization section. So the first and most important thing, in my opinion, to any builder, any kind of thought behind building, is what you are playing and what your lane is. So how do you plan to play your hero? What are some core items for your hero? What does your hero even do? Does your hero have good scaling? Does your hero like to shoot the gun? Does your hero have movement speed scaling off their spirit? Like, what even is your hero? What is it? Now, this is a little confusing because at times heroes can be played in many different ways. So a great example of that is someone like Pocket. I mean, it's not a great example, but you have this kind of meme Glocket build going around where you can build max gun, and then you have Spirit Pocket. Same thing with Haze. You can build full damage carry Haze like Parzilian with the Siphon Bullets, fire rate, or you can build more of a pick Haze, you know, Invis Duration, Curse, Slowing Hex, Sleep Dagger. So regardless of if you're doing is optimal or inoptimal, you realistically shouldn't build Spirit carry Moe and Krill, but you still can do Spirit carry Moe and Krill. Just don't be surprised if it goes really poorly. Basically, you need to have a plan for what you're doing. Sometimes though, your plan will have to adapt. Let's say you have a full entire spirit team and you're like a conventional spirit hero. Maybe you want to communicate with your team or consider pivoting your build mid-game to something more gun damage so the enemy team just doesn't build full spirit resist to counter you. So your build needs to be planned out, preferably before the game starts. And you need to monitor your build as the game goes on, because maybe you'll have some realizations about your team comp, the enemy team comp, what they're building that will influence your item choices and decisions. So how does this relate to early game itemization? We're going to talk about the lane after this, but for your hero, what you build in the early game is the foundation of your build. Your early game itemization oftentimes involves a lot of items that are very core to your hero. You know, for example, Pocket, Mystic Burst. Pocket's a burst hero with his spirit abilities. It's a very core and fundamental item for him because he's going to build Tank Buster. Haze as well, Rapid Rounds, a very core item to her kit. So is Bullet Lifesteal, you know, Rapid Rounds turns into Swift Striker, Burst Fire, maybe even get a Tussle Bullets early, and Capacitor is fantastic on Haze. So your early game itemization is the first strokes of your paintbrush for your painting. It's the beginning. It's how you're going to build your hero from the start. Early game itemization is influenced, in my opinion, the most by your lane matchup in the lane you're playing yourself. And I want you to know that there isn't only these two lanes in Deadlock. They're not all poke lanes and they're not only dive lanes. There's many, many, many different lane archetypes in Deadlock. And I'm sure there's like infinitely many, but how you should think about lanes, at least starting off, and in my opinion, these are the lanes that will influence your itemization the most. It's like dive lanes and poke lanes. We'll be covering both of those and how they will impact your itemization in Deadlock. A dive lane is usually a lane that deals high burst damage, quick DPS, CD dependent, tanky, have the ability to tower dive. I mean, there's many heroes and many lane matchups that could qualify as a dive lane, but essentially it's a lane that deals a lot of burst damage, quick, CD dependent, and items that can directly counter a dive lane are items like Rest Locket, Spirit Shielding, Extra Health. And what all these items do is they give you more health to play with in lane. And why is health important to counter a dive lane? Because dive lanes are very bursty. The damage is quick, CD dependent, right? And these items counter that. You know, if you can survive the onslaught of getting dived by a Shiv for him to have all of his stuff on CD through Rest of Locket, through Spirit Shielding, through Extra Health, then you will have basically anti-stratted their lane. you will have played anti-dive by building tanky enough to live the dive. And there's some heroes as well, when you think of like draft and stuff like that, but that are really good anti-dive. You know, for example, Ivy, Viscous Cube, Viscous Ball. I mean, there's lots and lots of different heroes that would be great anti-dive. But in the context of itemization, this is kind of the items that you want to be thinking about and building when you're versing a dive lane. If you're looking to build defensively into the lane, you can build offensively into a dive lane, no problem. But if you're scared of the lane and you don't think you can win it, these are some items here that will help you out with that. A quick little rule I want to set to prevent anyone from making any catastrophic mistakes with counter itemization, like how we're talking about here, is to never counter itemize too much. If you spend all your money in the laning phase itemizing against this dive lane that you're playing, how are you ever supposed to achieve the thing that we talked about initially? Building for your hero. The first thing, if we're on Haze and the only thing we're building is Arresta Locket, Spirit Shielding, and extra health, how are we ever going to play the game? We're not going to have our build, we're not going to have our items, we're going to lose our vision. We're just going to be a tanky little chungus running around the map. So don't get too lost throughout this video when we talk about counter itemizing in that thought. Like, don't be like, oh, it's dive lane, I need to build all this tank. Don't do that, okay? Just build a little bit. Obviously, you can build a little bit more if you feel necessary. A lot of this stuff is kind of vibes based, unfortunately. That's why I said, you know, when you're following builds left to right, it's bad because building and Deadlock and itemization requires so much thought. So now on the opposite end of the spectrum from dive, we have poke, harass, sustain damage, Ivy, Haze, and Furnace. You know, I don't know why I put Mini here. She really isn't slow in sustained DPS. She's very bursty. So, I mean, she's an abomination. She should just get removed from Deadlock. But anyways, what counters these slow sustained DPS lanes are extra regen, healing Rite, battle vests with the out of combat regen, full life steal. And the common theme between all these items are they all provide sustain. The slow damage DPS lane, the way you counter that is through regen, healing throughout the laning phase, right? And once again, important note, disclaimer, don't turn off the video. Do not over counter itemize against these poke lanes. Don't build an extra regen, a healing Rite, and a battle vest, and a bull life steal. Please, God, do not do that in your builds. Please, I'm begging you on my hands and knees. Build just an extra regen. Build just a heal Rite. Build just a little bit. You don't need that much, usually. Maybe sometimes you do, but for most cases, 99.99%, you only need a little bit to get through. Let's talk about one of the most important items for early game itemization in Deadlock, healing Rite. This item I have grown fond of over the weeks and months of playing this game, and I think it is probably one of the best laning items in the game. It has so much implications in center sacrifices, trading patterns, and boxes, like times of downtime. Deadlock is a game where you're rewarded for having good uptime. Always doing something is important, and it's what a lot of high level players do. And don't get me wrong, there's moments in Deadlock where you want to kind of just sit and analyze what's going on and not really concern yourself too much with uptime, right? Maybe you just want to like sit and look at the lane matchup and think for like 10 seconds AFK. That's fine. But healing Rite and why it's so important for downtime is after you take a bad trade in lane, what you can do is you can heal Rite and run boxes, you know, instead of buying extra regen and have uptime. When sinners are spawning as well, you could have the heal Rite from those trading patterns and use the heal Rite to get sinner sacrifices. So if you're ever in a weird spot in a lane or you're in a bad lane, always consider heal Rite, in my opinion, as one of your first options. It's really good. It'll get you through a lot of bad situations. When you're watching this video, this item may be weaker than what it is now, but I have the stats here just in case you want to take a look and compare it to what it is right now. I mean, this spirit scaling might get changed in the future, but at least right now, in the present time, this is what heal Rite is. So at the beginning of the video, one of the first things that we talked about were investment spikes and how sometimes it's bad to focus too hard on these investment spikes. One common thing that I want you to look at when you're looking at builds, this is the present time. Once again, I don't know if, you know, if you're watching this in a month or two from now, builds will be different, but right now, currently in Deadlock, if you look at all the builds, all of them, Sonya Snipers, Aiden's, Dews, Togethers, John, Osis, Ido, Metro, Saya, all of these players, and it's not bad what they're doing, but because they know how to think critically, right? But all these players, what they'll do is they will pursue a spike. Sonya Sniper, Max Spirit. Osis, Max Spirit. Ido, Max Spirit. Metro, Green. John, Spirit. Aiden, Gun. Do, Spirit. Together, Spirit. Holiday, Saya, Spirit. And this is all for the spikes, by the way. They're not like maxing their spirits and just getting as much spirit as they can. They're doing this to pursue their spikes. But what you need to understand is when you do this, right? If we kind of draw like this triangle here, we say that this is spirit, this is HP, this is gun. You sacrifice all of your other stats and just go straight into spirit. And this is obvious. When you're rushing your spirit spike, of course you're rushing your spirit spike. You're not gonna have any health, you're not gonna have any gun. But sometimes in the lane, you might need HP. What if you're versing a dive lane? You're versing a Shiv Page. They hit their alt spike and you have extra charge, Mystic Burst, QSR, extra spirit. You are dead if they know how to play the game. You are dying under your tower, right? So don't get too tunnel visioned on these investment spikes and think critically, right? Going back to lane matchup, think about the lane matchup. Are you going to die if you max your spirit investment? Do you need a heal right? Do you need an extra regen? Do you need an extra health? What do you need? So let's shift to mid-game itemization. There is no late game itemization. We're just gonna do mid-game. Maybe there is, but mid-game itemization, we go back to this theme. Go all the way back to the top. The first thing I said for early game is think about your hero. How do you plan to play your hero? When you're in the mid-game, you should be fleshing out your investment spikes, fleshing out the build, completing the vision. I have a perfect example here. Current time, Gun Warden, in my opinion, the most signature final items are the Glass Cannon, the Vampiric Burst, and the Lucky Shot. When you have those three final items as Warden, maybe not the Lucky Shot, but the Glass Cannon and Vampiric Burst, you are like final core build. You have completed the pyramid. Now, to kind of get an idea of what these final core builds might look like, you might want to go to, Stat Locker and look at what people are building, look at how the pros are building, what top items are they usually building. Now, of course, going back to the beginning, don't build these things mindlessly. Think about it. Why is Warden building Glass Cannon? Why is Warden building Vampiric Burst? Why is Warden building Lucky Shot? I'll tell you, for Glass Cannon, Warden's bullet does so much damage. And because he's scaling it with this high percentage from Glass Cannon, his bullets are going to deal a tremendous amount of damage. In addition, he has so much HP that Glass Cannon's not really going to hurt him, right? He's a tanky boy. He has a lot of healing through his ults, through his Vampiric Burst when he gets it, through his 2 shielding. Very mobile. He's not really too concerned with his health. Vampiric Burst, the thing that Warden lacks a lot is fire rate. And Warden, you can build a hybrid Warden, but for Gun Warden, you're building exclusively gun. There is no better lifesteal option than Vampiric Burst for a Gun Warden. So these are some just deep thoughts about this Warden example that I have and how you should be thinking about it and how you should be fleshing out your final mid-game itemization for your hero. This mid-game itemization discussion that we had is very similar, in my opinion, to like a late-game itemization discussion you'll have on fleshing out the vision for your character. So treat the mid-game and the late game in this video as very similar, if not the same. So let's move on to counter itemization. And you guys are probably a little worried right now about how big and how many things there are. But what we're going to do, and my personal approach on how I'm going to teach you guys counter itemization, is give you all the examples in a build on how you could counter itemize. And the thing that I really want you guys to take home is counter itemization. This is my normal Wraith build, right? Look, it exists from the beginning of the build to the end of the build, to the middle of the build, to the early mid part of the build, to the mid late part of the build. It exists everywhere in your build. So sure, okay, you can counter itemize specifically for like an Infernus or something like that, right? But just know that when you are building, you are counter itemizing in every game to some extent, right? When you really think deeply about it. So I'm going to showcase all the examples in my build where counter itemization exists and how those items, like what makes those items counter itemization, like what makes a BRS counter itemization, right? And when you would build a BRS. So get cozy, get your popcorn. This can be a long talk. Starting off with BRS, the reason it's in this build, guys, is BRS is a really important item for Wraith because you build Tesla bullets later on, so you're constantly going to be playing BRS. So BRS, when you would build this item, is usually against a team that has a lot of resist. So Billy is a hero that naturally builds a lot of resist. Yamato gets resist in her ult, sorry. Abrams has innate regen and healing in his build. So, it makes a lot of sense because he's a very tanky hero with his boons and everything. Moan Krona's Burrow gets a lot of resist, right? Suppressor, same thing on why you'd build this on Wraith, because you have Tesla bullets, you can proc it very easily. But Suppressor, it reduces fire rate, right? And you would want to build Suppressor when you're versing fire rate dependent heroes. So heroes like Wraith that need to shoot their gun to build up cards. Viper that literally their gimmick is to shoot their gun, unless you're playing against a Spirit Viper that just throws a bullet and one-shots your team. Drifter, his 3 scales his weapon damage. His Bullets deal weapon damage, right? Okay, once again, if you're versing like a Spirit Drifter that just one-shots through his Rend and his 2, yeah, maybe not build Suppressor against him, but still, he does depend to an extent on his fire rate. And Haze, like this Haze hero, her fixation builds up through fire rate. How many bullets you shoot at the hero is how quickly you build up your fixation. So if you're versing like maybe 3 of these heroes, maybe it might be worth to build Suppressor over BRS in this case. Slowing Hex. This item is really good against heroes that require very heavily or depend very heavily on their movement abilities. So if we look, heroes like Wraith Teleport, signature ability for Wraith. You know, without her teleport, she's really vulnerable. Mina, you all have versed Mina. Mina Bats is one of the most annoying things to deal with in the game. Build a Slowing Hex to deal with her. Mirage, Tornado, signature ability. Sinclair Clone, him walking up on a wave, punching it to death, and him teleporting away is very annoying. So build a Slowing Hex to counter him. Enduring Speed, this item provides you slow resist. So heroes that have some kind of movement speed slow, you know, Kelvin, for example, the Arctic Beam. I don't really put any heroes here, but Kelvin's one of the great examples for that. Mina as well with max love bite slows you and reduces your stamina, so enduring speed would help out with that, right? Debuff reduction is probably one of the most bought counter itemization stats in the game, and it can apply to so many things. I mean, this arrow I draw, you'll see Paradox as a hero builds a lot of debuff. Bolt Resist Shredder, right? We talked about that item. That was one of the first items that I'm building as Wraith. Healdane. There's so many debuffs that exist in Deadlock, and this item will be a real go-to item for counter itemization. Right here we got Spirit Resilience. This item is really good if you're versing a lot of spirit heroes, you know, a Seven, a Mina, Pocket. You know, if you're versing like a full spirit team, you know, someone on your team says, yo, they're all spirit, build a spirit resist, it'll go wonders. Or maybe if the Mina has like 1,000,000 souls, right? Build a spirit resilience to counter her. So on one end you have spirit resist, and on the other you have bolt resist. That's exactly what Metal Skin and Escalating Resilience provide. You're gonna want to build these items when the enemy team has a lot of gun damage, you know, Haze, Gun Viscous, Gun Viper, Gun Warden, Gun Geist, Gun Ivy, Gun Drifter, right? If the enemy team has a lot of heroes that like M1 and that are building M1, right? Make sure to check if they're actually building weapon damage. Build these items, they will go wonders. Or even if there's like a massive threat, like a really fed Viper that has a lot of gun damage, you know, get a Metal Skin, just counter him with it. Crippling Headshot. This item, when you headshot an enemy, reduces their spirit resist, reduces their bullet resist, and gives them anti-heal every time you headshot. So you can proc this pretty frequently on a hero. And Victor is a big hero, a massive hero that hates versing crippling headshots. Crippling is one of the best items to use against Victor. So is Yamato as well. You know, when she ults, she gets into the shadow transformation, gains a lot of spear resist, gains a lot of bolt resist, and crippling headshot reduces her resist by so much. Unstoppable. This item is a classic. You know, in Dota, it's BKB, but it's a little different in Dota. Like reduces the magic damage that you take. This item just prevents you from taking any kind of stun, any kind of debuff, ultimate or not. Right? So this item is great for carries, you know, late game if the enemies have curse or stuns and all this jazz, just get on stop and pop it and just kill everyone, right? Or, you know, if you're playing someone like Dynamo that needs to get their ultimate off in a team fight without it getting interrupted, pop on stop before you ult. And if there's like a hard carry CC threat on the enemy team, like a Mo and Krill or a Lasso, you know, Mo combo is so like it's such a classic ability that is used on carries, you know, pop unstop when you see Mo, so he can't combo you and you can come before he combos you, right? Reactive Barrier is one of those anti-dive items that I was talking about at the beginning. You know, if you're versing like an Abrams into the dive lane, you know, when he shoulder charges you into your Guardian, your reactive is going to proc. And this item can be built in the laning phase and even out of the laning phase. It's really good against heroes that have a lot of stun. You need some kind of survivability, you know, in lane CC. Page, Bebop. Bebop gets literally crippled against Reactive Barrier. Abrams, Mo and Krill combo. All these items will help you survive longer against CCs if they're too much of a threat in your game. Plated Armor, very similar to Metal Skin and Escalating Resilience, but it's very different. It blocks the bullets that are coming at you. So against heroes like Infernus that requires so heavily on him proccing his afterburn from shooting you. Mina needs to proc the love bites from shooting you. Drifter needs to shoot you. Haze needs to proc fixation from shooting you. It's really important if you're versing like a lot of these heroes, like 4 or 5 of these heroes in a game, to build this item because they won't be able to do anything to you. The most important thing to understand about this item and what's different, once again, is it blocks the bullets from coming at you. It doesn't reduce the bullet damage, it blocks the bullets from hitting you. Ethereal Shift, we don't really see this item being built as much as it was in the past, but if you ever would build E-Shift, it's really good for self-PL. You know, like let's say you just get dived by a bunch of heroes. Pop E-Shift, live for a little bit. So specific team compositions, right? And E-Shift is an iframe, so it's an invuln Really good for stuff like Lash Alt, dodging that, Chain Gang, dodging that, Pocket Affliction, dodging that. Now, why not just buy Counterspell over E-Shift? I don't know. Why not buy Counterspell, right? It is probably just better than E-Shift, but yeah, same item, Counterspell, E-Shift, very similar items. Armor piercing rounds. So we talked about plated armor, and plated armor prevents the bullets from even hitting you by a percent, you know, it blocks the on-hit effects like how we talked about by a percent chance. Armor piercing rounds literally is an item that is meant to counter plated armor, because it's like, well, your bullets at a certain percent are unavoidable no matter what they have, plated armor or not. So this item is supposed to be a counter to plated armor. It can also be a counter to heavy bullet resist comps, because it will pierce through the bullet resist. You know, it will ignore the bullet resist the item. The last item we have here, Frenzy. So this item gives you some spear resist, gives you some move speed, and then when you're below a certain threshold of HP, you gain even more spear resist and fire rate. So it's like the damage version of spear resilience in a weird way. It gives you less spear resist while giving you more damage. In a weird way, it's totally unique. So once again, it's really good for heroes that do a lot of spirit damage. It's, I say here, spirit resilience but damage. You know, if you're versing like a multi-spirit team, or maybe there's like a spirit threat that you just need to deal with, you can build Frenzy instead of spirit resilience if you feel that it's good, you know, vibes based. We talked a lot about counter itemization. Well, how are you supposed to know when you need to counter itemize? Something that we talked about is the frequency of these heroes that you see. So if you see like 5 M1 heroes, you know, metal skin, plated armor, escalating resilience, these items are looking pretty nice, pretty fresh. But like, let's say that it's not as clear as that. Well, how do you know when to counter itemize or not? The issue is, once again, has a lot of things, and why I had those 3 rules at the beginning. It's very vibes based and instinct based. But for me personally, the best advice that I can give you is the hero you're versing and souls, how much souls they have. So an example here, I took a screenshot of 2 heroes. You know, you have Yamato with 1.2k souls, and then you have an Infernus with 50k souls. Who are you going to want to counter itemize for? Probably the Infernus with the 50k souls, and not the Yamato with 1.2k souls. So what this looks like is building debuff remover, debuff reduction, maybe some fire rate slow, because he's an M1 hero, right? That's one way you can kind of scale the threats in your head, is through souls. Another way to think about it too is the threat of the hero itself. So Pocket is probably one of the best examples for it. His affliction is game changing. If he hits a big affliction, you're done for. You're donezo. It doesn't matter how many souls he has. I mean, I guess it does to an extent, but a big pocket affliction is a big pocket affliction. So something like that, you're always seeing teams, no matter like what team it is, they're picking Viscous, they're picking Paige because she can build DB. They're building DBs in the game for the pocket affliction, you know, building counter spells. So that is an example of a hero where that hero is just like a continental threat. If he hits a big affliction, you're donezo. My experience playing Deadlock for so long and so many games, some other just points of advice that I have to recommend to you that I didn't really know where to put in this video, I'm just gonna put them all in the end, is this idea of scale versus tempo. So oftentimes, you know, you're playing the game, and what you need to think about is the pace of the game at which it's being played at. In a turn of 6 lobbies, 20 minutes, if you watch my previous videos and coaching sessions and whatever, you know that 20 minutes is mid-boss time. At that time, it's very risky to scale by, like save up for a glass cannon, because a fight could break out any moment that leads into mid-boss. So maybe you're tempo buying more at that time. Maybe mid-boss just got taken and all the rejuves are gone and it was like a nothing burger. That's a very safe time to scale, because you know mid-boss is going to be up for 5 minutes. Maybe your team just did Urn right on spawn and it's 4 minutes away from the next spawn of Urn. That'll be a very safe time to scale by, because there's nothing really going on for the next 4 to 5 minutes in the game. Stakes is another important big thing. It's kind of what I talked about with the scale and tempo, like the impending threat of what's going on. So what I have written down here is the likelihood of something bad happening soon. You know, if you feel vibes wise that a fight's gonna break out, just tempo buy. It doesn't really matter what you buy. It's important to have those souls spent for that pivotal game fight. If you are sitting on 3k souls and that fight that you just took led into mid-boss, maybe that 3k souls of power that you didn't spend would have been the make it or break it for the fight. The last and one of the most important things, this doesn't really have anything to do with itemization, but it's giving more value out of your itemization. You know, communicating the things that you're buying, and if you're tempoing or you're scaling. I'm close to my spike. Please don't fight. I have my spike. Let's fight. Your itemization is pointless if you don't communicate the pivotal points in your build or itemization, which you're strong or you're weak or you're saving up for something huge, you know? So everyone, I hope this video was very helpful, and I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and feel free to share this video with any friends that are trying to learn how to build in Deadlock. Appreciate you all. Drop a like, subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and I have a bunch of other Deadlock educational content if you'd like to watch. I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye-bye.